I'm Beaver Trapper in Birmingham, and in this segment of the show, I'm hopefully going to share with you lessons that I've learned in the School of Hard Knocks. Hello and welcome to another edition of the School of Hard Knocks. In previous editions, we've talked a lot about storing food, storing water, and storing fuel. Tonight we're going to talk about storing something a little different, but in many ways is probably a lot more important than food, water, and fuel, especially in today's society. What we're going to talk about tonight is how to store your life. And by that, what I mean is storing your identity, your education, your possessions, your skill set, all of the paper items that determine who you are in a modern society. In the last year, we've had a spate of tornadoes here in Birmingham, and I personally have had friends that have lost their homes to tornadoes. And by losing their homes, I mean losing their homes where they have nothing. And the material possessions were able to be replaced fairly easily. But the problematic issues came down to when they lost their documentation of who they were and what they had. And it caused issues across the board for them. For instance, if you were blown out of your bed at 3 o'clock in the morning into your yard and your home was destroyed, you wouldn't even have your wallet in your pocket. It would be gone. Imagine waking up in the morning and you have nothing. You can't even prove who you are. You have no driver's license. You have no credit cards. You have no money. You can't prove who you are, much less do anything. How are you going to file for insurance claims? Do you even know how to contact your insurance agent if you don't have their phone number? How are you going to find that phone number? So to combat that situation and to try and prepare for that situation, I'm going to share with you what I've documented, how I've documented it, and where and how I've stored it. And in this process, what you're going to find is that a digital camera and a scanner and a computer are the most valuable things that you can use to accomplish these tasks. Now what I do is I have scanned all of my critical documents, and I scan them into PDF files, and I've saved them on a computer. And then I take these files, whether they're PDF files, Word documents, or what have you, or photographs, and I encrypt them using a program called TrueCrypt. And TrueCrypt takes documents or files, encrypts them securely, and makes one encrypted file out of them. You can then store that file on your computer. You can store it on an external USB drive. You can store it in your email. You can store it off-site in a secure location. You can put a copy of it in a safe deposit box, whatever you want to do. But let's start with our basic documents. One of the most critical documents that everybody has is a birth certificate. Just about everything you go and do requires a birth certificate, a proof of who you are. So you need to take your birth certificates of everybody in your family. You need to put them on a scanner, turn them into a PDF file, and you need to save them. You need to have a copy of those things. The same goes for your Social Security cards. If you're married, you have a marriage license. If you're divorced, you may have divorce papers or divorce decrees. Hopefully you have a will. If you have children, you're going to need immunization records to get them into school. Perhaps you're self-employed, you own a business, you might need a business license. It would be good if you own a passport to have a copy of your passport. What if you're retired military? Do you have a copy of your DD-14? All of these are common records that you may be required to produce in order to get back on your feet or to prove who you are. And if those things are destroyed, your life is going to be very difficult. You're going to have an uphill battle. But if you have scanned those records into PDF files and you have saved them somewhere safe and you can print them out, you're going to be way ahead of the game. The same thing goes for any type of diplomas, transcripts, personal training accomplishments, or certifications. If you had to relocate, let's say your town was destroyed in a hurricane, let's say there was a natural disaster of some sort or another, and you had to temporarily relocate and secure employment, you're going to need all of the above documents that we've just talked about to prove who you are and to be able to rent an apartment or to get reestablished. And when you go to apply for a job, people are going to want proof not only of who you are but what you've accomplished. They're going to want copies of any type of certifications. If you're a welder, electrician, do you have licenses? Personally, I'm in IT. I hold 10 Microsoft certifications. I keep copies of those certifications and my transcripts of all the exams that I've passed. That way, if I had to reapply for a job, I have copies of all that. Something as simple as a resume. If you're a displaced person or a refugee, or your home has been destroyed, you're living in a temporary shelter, you're trying to find work in a new town, it would be a great help to have a copy of your resume in a Word document form so that you could go to a Kinko's or somewhere else and print that resume out. It's going to save you a lot of time compared to having to redo your resume from scratch from memory because you have nothing written down. You have no records. The same thing would go for having copies of your W-2s or your pay stubs or anything like that. If you're going to go to a prospective employer and you're going to claim that you have a work history and you made X amount of dollars, if you can actually produce some documentation of that, that's going to work in your favor. Another thing to think about is, what do you have in your wallet? Your wallet generally contains your most important documents. It contains your credit card or credit cards, your driver's license, your insurance cards, that sort of thing. You need to scan those. How many people can tell me right now what your driver's license number is? I can, because I've committed it to memory, but most people can't. But if you had a scanned copy of your driver's license and you're the victim of a tornado incident, that's going to help you get reestablished. Same thing would go for any type of car titles or automobile titles or registrations, anything like that. If you have any extensive medical records or a medical history that should be documented, that's certainly something to consider. And finally, it never hurts to have a somewhat recent copy of your utility bills. In many instances, you can use a utility bill to serve as identification in some respects. If you owe money on your mortgage, you need to have those records. If you own a home, or if you own title to land, you need to be able to produce those records. So that is something to think about as far as documenting who you are, what you've accomplished in your life, and having your personal papers in order and having them secure, having them off-site so that if your entire home is destroyed at 3 o'clock in the morning and you literally the next morning when the sun comes up, you don't even have a wallet, you can get to these papers somehow, somewhere. You can get to these records. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, having friends that lost their home in the recent tornadoes here, you may think that just because you have homeowners insurance that you're covered. You may think that that homeowners insurance is going to cover all of your possessions and that you're going to get a big fat check, no questions asked, and you're going to be able to go out and buy all new stuff. I can promise you that's not how it happens. Now, there may be some people that make out like bandits, but there are a lot of people that get screwed out of a lot of money because they haven't documented what they have and what it was worth. One thing you need to understand is that if you own a digital camera, a picture costs nothing. Think about that. It costs you absolutely nothing to take and save a picture. You need to take a picture of all your possessions. My wife and I ride bicycles. We have several expensive bicycles. You not only need to have the serial numbers for those, but you need to have pictures of them as well. If you're a professional trapper like Clint is, and let's say you have 1,000 traps, and let's say the average cost of a new trap is $20 or $30. If you lost your traps, it may cost you $20,000, $30,000 or more to replace all of your traps. Well, if you don't have the receipts for those traps, if you don't have pictures of them, if you can't prove that you owned that many traps, they're not just going to write you a blank check because you say you had $30,000 in traps and now all of a sudden they're gone. Trust me, it doesn't work that way. You need to take pictures of the contents of every room in your house. You need to stand in every room and simply do a 360 and take pictures. That way you're going to be able to show how many computers you had, how many TVs you had, how many bookcases you had, everything. How much clothes you had, the whole 9 yards. You need to do that outside your house. You need to do that inside your house. You need to do that in your garage. All of your possessions need to be documented if you want to be compensated for them in the case of a loss. One of the last things I want to talk about tonight is your personal contacts, your address book. This doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you think about it, if you have extended family in other parts of the country, if you have friends in other cities, can you really recall all of their names and addresses and phone numbers? Could you get in touch with all of them tonight if your home was destroyed and you were outside with a borrowed cell phone? How could you get in touch with these people? How could you notify them of what had happened to you? So you need to keep a digital address book in with all of these files. One last thing is any type of financial information is going to be critical. You need to know your bank accounts, bank account numbers. If you have 401ks, you need to know that. If there are websites that you log into and use a username and a password to access those accounts, you need to have that information recorded. Now, once you have all of this stuff and you have it all saved on your computer, you've got these Word documents, you've got these PDF files, you've got all of these pictures and all of that, you need to investigate how to encrypt those files and how to save them. And one of the best programs, and it's free, that I've ever used is called TrueCrypt, C-R-Y-P-T. You can download a copy of TrueCrypt from the internet, and you create a TrueCrypt volume, which is basically like a big zip file, and it contains all of these files. You zip it up, and then you have a password that allows you to decrypt that file and get all of that information out. Once you have that file encrypted, and once you have it all zipped up, personally I keep multiple copies of that file in multiple places. I have a copy of it on my network at work, so that if my home is destroyed, if my office made it through, I've got a copy there. You need to familiarize yourself with the concept of cloud computing, and that basically is storing your data, what they call in the cloud, which is in a server network that is maintained by someone else in another location. An example of that would be Google Mail, the Gmail. You can upload files to your Gmail account, and it's stored on the servers in Gmail. And I'm not worried about privacy concerns or anybody getting my information because it's encrypted when it's stored there. You can upload personal photographs to services like PhotoBucket or Picasa, and those photos are stored on somebody else's server, maintained and backed up off-site, so that if your personal laptop or your home is destroyed, your pictures survive. Your heirlooms, your family pictures, your insurance documentation pictures, they're all out there, and if you get back to a computer somewhere else, you can get to them. So I really want you to consider what we talked about tonight, because everybody wants to talk about storing guns, everybody wants to talk about storing ammo, everybody wants to talk about storing buckets of beans and rice, and people are woefully unprepared to put their life back together after their home has been destroyed in a flood or a tornado or an earthquake. And let's face it, if you don't know how to use a computer, you need to learn, because using a computer today is like knowing how to read and write 100 years ago. It's a basic skill that you need in order to be successful and get by. So I hope this has been of value, and we'll see you next time. Good night.